Hi, good afternoon. How are you all doing? My name is Abhilash. I'm a student and a folklore and culture study enthusiast, and welcome to another session of folklore and culture studies. I hope all of you are enjoying the journey with me. If you are watching this session for the first time, I strongly recommend that you subscribe to this channel and watch the videos or listen to this podcast, in a sequential manner so that you do not miss out any, any flow in the subject. Okay. So without much ado, let's get started. Before we start, let's do a quick progress check. So currently, I follow the MA IGNO curriculum. And right now, so the curriculum is divided into four sections. The first major section is folklore and culture, conceptual perspectives, under which we have block one, which is folklore issues and methods. And under block one, we have four units. We are done with unit one, unit two, we're continuing with unit three. Unit three is folklore and allied disciplines, and in this unit we try and establish relationship between other allied disciplines with folklore. So in the previous sessions we've covered anthropology, gender studies, ethnomusicology, linguistics, and the immediate previous session was psychology. Sorry, the immediate previous session was linguistics, and today we shall cover psychology, the relationship between folklore and culture studies and psychology. So that's what we're going to do today. So without much ado, we shall get started. So here we go. So let's understand psychology, right? Let's understand what is psychology all about. So many of the concepts of psychology, like unconscious decisions, principles of human understanding, self motivations, behavior patterns, and consciousness have led to folklore studies. So, these are some of the aspects of psychology which has led to folklore studies. Man is seen as being motivated by his inner urges and also responds to certain stimulus and is capable of guiding and changing his behavior. So, that is man, not the gender, but man, the species that is being looked at, right? So interest in psychology began in the 20th century, and many scholars like Arne and Walter Anderson have applied its guiding beliefs to their studies in folklorism. Right, applied its guiding beliefs would mean the guiding beliefs of a man, the behavior patterns. A psychoanalytical school was formed in 1967 that viewed folklore as a behavior. So this is how psychology looks at folklore and culture. It looks as it as a behavior. The significant contributions of Freud, Jung, and Bose during the 19th and 20th century led to great advancements being made in the folklore research. So these are some prominent names because of which um some of the great advancements were made in the field of folklore research. Folklore is seen as being the byproduct of unconscious mind and repressed inner feelings, right? So this is interesting, right? It's seen as being the byproduct of the unconscious mind and repressed inner feelings. So Freud used many folk tales, myths, and jokes to explain his work. The distant past, according to him, was hidden in the unconscious past and reflected in folklore symbols. So at times you see some folklore symbols, which is which we will cover later, that which is usually, it may not happen, but it's a reflection of the human mind or a reflection of the unconscious mind. For example, in certain places we find pictures of carvings of unicorn, right? Unicorns do not exist, these are in dreams. So that can be an example of uh, the correlation. So therefore Freud leaned heavily on myths, fairy tales, taboos, and jests, and said that dreams express the fears and wishes of infantile sexuality as expressed in symbols. So in symbols as well, we see some infantile sexuality. right? Expressed in the form of carvings or pictures, which are nothing but creations of human mind, the unconscious mind, particularly. For example, he's giving an example here. For example, he drew upon the famous Greek myth of Oedipus and exposed the desire of the boy child loving his own mother. So that's, that's an unconscious mind. In the 20th century, research reevaluated the fact that the hidden past was seen to survive in dream-like images. So even if there are some past events that we sort of try not to think of, but we dream about that. So this is what exactly what they're saying. The unified cultural past was thus linked up deeply to the development of the human man. Jung also interpreted myths and fairy tales by the method of symbolism. He says all men share in collective unconsciousness that is reflected in the archetypes of morals. The persona of a man, hence, assumes a professional role. For example, we can see the negative figures in myths represent the dark side to a personality. So at times we see some negative figures, in folklore as symbols, which is nothing but a representation of the dark side of a human personality. Hence, according to Jung, the past represented a significant human activity through which an individual could experience inner symbolic representations of a collective human experience. Jung saw the psyche of the human mind as consisting of personal conscious, the personal unconscious, and the collective conscious. Right? Personal conscious is things that we are conscious about, we are aware of. Personal unconscious could be things that happens in the back of the head. We don't sort of voluntarily do it, right? And collective conscious is when a group decides, right, what is right, what is wrong. So that's what it means. So Ernest Jones and Geza Rahim also find the direct associations between dreams and folklore. So the whole idea, in these two paragraphs was to draw a correlation between psychology, which is another, if we go deeper, to find a correlationship between dreams and folklore. They see dreams as combining with fantasies. So dreams, are combined with fantasies to form myths. Myths are not realities. Dreams are thus the substance of mythical tales. Mythical tales are things which are not true, right? But tales, stories. Now comes Charles Darwin. Let's understand his perspective. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution of man is reflected in psychological approaches to folklorists. In 1944, Malinowski established the functional analysis of culture as based on the behavior patterns of individuals. After World War II, the role of the individual grew in folklore. The identity of a person was given much more significance than social environments. The individual was seen as fulfilling many roles and his social behavior was given much attention. Traditional folk culture was thus seen to have greater intimacy and a person to person contact rather than mass culture. So what it means, essentially what it means that it focuses on an individual personality rather than a group. For example, a particular group would behave in a particular way in a particular situation, right? But Charles Darwin's theory and his association with, or his interpretation of folklore, his interpretation by other folklorists says that it is the individual behavior was given much more importance. The individual role was seen as fulfilling many roles, and it was given more importance than a mass culture. That's the essence. This became the main object of study in the 1960s. Individual attitude was not seen to have any class considerations. The emphasis was here on the process rather than the product. According to Hassan al Shami, the folklorist should be concerned about the responses and experiences of the people as well. So one should not pay attention to folklore items, but rather the social and cultural conditions in which the individual is placed. So, in other words, it says that, let's say an individual behaves or responds in a certain way. Uh, what Alchemy says is that response is basis the social and cultural conditions and not individual driven. That's what it means. Shamim believes that folklore behavior makes a direct connection to people's motivation, context, rewards, and punishments. The expression of folklore is affected by the individual ego, individuals' attitudes towards uh, themselves. Hence, many communities may use folk items as reflecting their own cultural identity. However, one cannot deny the involvement of community on the individual. The responses of the human must also be considered while studying folklorism. So here, you have many concepts, many overlapping concepts. For example, there's one statement which says the expression of folklore is affected by the individual ego, right? An individual's attitude toward themselves, how a person, what attitude a person has towards oneself, and the individual ego, that is one of the expressions of folklore, is what it says. Hence, on the other hand, what other folklorists feel that the involvement of the community of on for example, the effect of a particular community on an individual cannot be ruled out as well. That also has some effect. The responses of the human must also be considered while studying folklore. So it's not only the individual, ego and attitude, but also the effect of the community. It's a combined approach. The main components one needs to understand are the stimulus of an individual. Stimulus is something that triggers an individual, right? Condition and context of the response, right? So when someone responds, what were the conditions under which a person responded, and what was the context, is the second point. And the third point is effects and results of the stimulus, effects and results of the trigger. Stimulus is nothing but a trigger. So these are some of the main components one needs to understand from a psychological perspective. Many cognitive approaches are being given direct expressions in folklorism. Cognitive approaches are, things related to the mind. For example, Glassy has studied the enclosure of folk housing during the American Revolution. He sees this as a result of the need for order in chaotic times created by the revolution. So the houses those were built were as an effect of the chaos. There was a lot of chaos during the American Revolution. So the houses sort of bring in order. Order, in this case, order would mean brings in an organized structure, right? So human memory, part of the cognitive science, is also studied in folklorism. Right. So let's understand more. According to the scholar Georges, a dynamic, context-specific model is needed. Right. So researchers feel that memory is both stable and variable, and it greatly depends on the situation of the context. For example, one can easily recall the plot in the folk tale rather than the details of the events and actions, right? So memory is funny, right? At times we sort of remember incidents which took place perhaps 20 years ago, but we might forget events which took place 20 minutes ago, right? So it can be stable and it can be variable as well, and that's exactly what Georges states. And the example quoted here is one can recall the plot. Plot is a story of a folk tale. That's easier to recall than the details of the events and actions. So that's one of the examples. Memory, hence, is central to folklore, right? Folk narratives are also being studied as part of the community social behaviors and communication in performance and art are seen to be emerging from social and cultural conditions. For example, the art of storytelling lies on the role of communication with the identification on the teller and the audience. Hence, this shows that performers and narrators are all identify themselves exclusively in cultural terms. So, what it talks about is folk narratives in the sense folk narratives are folk stories or folk poetries are are studied as community behaviors and communication and performance and arts. The way you communicate these stories is also a part of these studies, right? And these mostly emerge from social and cultural conditions. And the art of storytelling lies on the role of the communication with the identification of the teller and the audience. So the teller is someone who tells the stories, right? And audience is people who listen to those stories. So and the communication between them mostly depends on a lot of social and cultural conditions is is what the essence of this paragraph. The emotional aspect of folk narratives thus plays an important role, right? There's always an emotional aspect to everything that we do, right? And it's particularly important in in the study of folklore. So in this, the elements of psychology are applied and imparted. For example, many emotional factors in folk tales are analyzed, such as hate, love, jealousy, and anger, right? However, one can add here that emotions are different from sentiments. So they're saying that emotions are different from sentiments. Let's try and understand more. While emotions are largely biological responses, sentiments are experiences that are understood cognitively, like patriotism, religious, or aesthetic, right? So the way they've divided um, the difference between emotions and sentiments are mostly biological impulses or responses, but emotions are more understood at a cognitive level, the level of the conscious mind. For example, we have a different feeling or different emotion when when it comes to um, words like patriotism, religion, aesthetic, right? So we have a different emotion altogether, and that's the difference they they're trying to identify here. Many researchers are also paying attention to the topics of mental health, the folklore practices of therapy and cure, such as magic, shamanism, and the beliefs and values of an individuals are being questioned. So these things are questioned. The application of psychology thus helps us to bridge the gaps found in folklore studies. Right, so there are obviously some gaps as well, right? Because the study is old, and initially there was no structure to it. Slowly, the subject found its place and found its own structure through involvement of different folklorists and collection of different materials, and XYZ. So therefore, the application of psychology thus helps us bridge the gaps found in folklore studies. So when we apply these strategies, it helps us bridge the gap between the theory and the practical thing. Psychoanalysis has had a notable influence on folklorism as well. So that's all we have today from uh, the subject perspective, from a psychology perspective. In in I hope you enjoyed this session today so far. If you do have any questions, please post your questions in the comment box, and I would love to respond to all your questions there. And if you do have any suggestions or feedback, I'm open to suggestions and feedback. Do share your thoughts and suggestions, and collectively we can grow as a community. We can help each other, and we can learn the subject is super interesting. And if you do have any interesting learnings which you think can help the community, please feel free to share that with me. You get all the credits for that, but the idea is together we grow as a community, right? So if you think I'm adding any sort of value to your folklore and culture studies journey, uh, do subscribe to this channel. All right. So I'll see you soon in another session of folklore and culture studies. Until then, enjoy your evening. I will see you soon. Take care. Bye bye.